All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Denise. It's been a great few days. Thanks to everyone for being here. And what I want to do is go back for a second to Ahmed's opening talk for North America, because he described four key Agile domains that act as some of the core muscles, he called it, of Agile that we need to develop to create business success. And one of these domains is leadership. And as Denise said, we've heard the topic of leadership come up in some way every day, sometimes multiple times a day, especially as it relates to empowering people. And if we truly believe that people are the most agile part of any organization, then investing in people and unlocking people's potential, so to speak, becomes one of the most first and foremost priorities of leadership. So while leaders need to do this for their people, my question is, who's doing this for the leaders? So today we're going to talk and put a magnifying glass on the agile domain of leadership. And I imply this in the title of this session. It's called How to Fortify an Agile Transformation and Get to Value Faster. But to ensure we're starting on the same page, I want you to know the title it could have been, which is what I have here. What do coins, Stranger Things, and bowling have in common? And my objective for our time together is for you to see how these three seemingly random topics relate to each other, um, and to leadership and to agile. I also want to leave you with three coaching hacks at the end so that even in the absence of an official coach, I want you to feel like you can try these on with yourself, with your team, should any of them resonate. So, with that, let me tell you a story. There was once a Roman general who had to lead his troops into battle against an army 10 times their size. His men were filled with doubt, and he knew he needed to boost the spirits to prepare them for battle. So he had the troops stop at a temple along their way so they could pray for victory. And at the temple, just before they began to pray, the general held up a coin and he said the following: I am going to ask the gods to help us crush our enemy. And if this coin lands on heads, we will win. But if it lands on tails, we're going down in defeat. So then he asked everyone to pray with all their heart that destiny would be on their side. And after the prayer, the general tossed the coin, and to everyone's relief, it landed on heads. Yay! Everyone was ecstatic, and they went into battle feeling confident. They attacked the enemy with vigor, and just as they had prayed for, the troop was victorious, despite the fact that they were outnumbered. So the soldiers shared with the general how relieved they were that the gods were on their side, because no one else, of course, could have changed their fate. Who else but the gods? And then with a wink, the general then said to them, Really? And he showed them that the coin that he had tossed actually had heads on both sides. Great leaders not only lead by example, they believe in their mission, but it doesn't end there. One of the crowning achievements of leadership is to get others to believe in the mission as well. They need to give their teams hope. We often call this vision, and it's part of the job. So because when people believe in something, we all know this, they can accomplish amazing things. We get to that discretionary effort we don't often get to. So, what might be getting in the way of leaders having this power of the coin kind of influence and impact on their teams to unlock people, which is so critical to adapting agile ways of working, as we've been discussing across the next few days? So, this question isn't just a rhetorical one. What's getting in the way? There's a lot of current data right now, and it's disclosing the discontent a lot of companies feel about how leaders are leading their companies into the future. I want to share a few sobering stats with you. It was taken from a Brandon Hall study a few years ago, and they hint at the fact that companies may not always be focused on the optimal areas that empower leaders so that leaders can empower their teams. And while these aren't necessarily specific to agile leaders, they still very much relate. Let's look at just a few of them right now. All right, so 58% of organizations in the study said their top priority is closing leadership skill gaps. But 43% said their top priority is closing gaps at all leader levels, okay? But only 5% had fully implemented development at all levels. And of that, 18% of organizations said their leaders were very effective at meeting business goals, 18% only. And then only 19% said they were very effective at developing leaders. So what's interesting is that more money is being spent on leadership development than likely any other area of corporate training. Yet 71% of organizations don't feel their leaders are able to lead their organization into the future. So the question is like, on what is leadership development money being spent? Well, some of it call it the one and done events, right? It's things like offsites, webinars, conferences, executive retreats. I like to call these so what? So what events? Because without proper follow up, leaders often go back to their desks. They keep doing what they always did to get what they always got. Why? Because usually what they always got was success, but then variables start changing, and what you did, what you always got, may not work anymore. So what they did the training if nothing really changes thereafter. And then we layer on things like pioneering business agility, setting a clear market vision, aligning to current and future customers, developing emergent strategies, all things in that leadership domain. And what we're doing to help leaders to build their agile muscles, what are we doing to develop those behaviors required of them to do all of this? Given that leadership is such an essential part of this agile domain, can we afford not to be providing this? So, how do we get leaders then from so what to now what? And the good news is that now what? It doesn't have to be rocket science. It's actually quite simple because what's needed lives in conversation. And if developing agile leadership muscle lives in conversation, what might be needed is a conversation based structure to achieve it. So here's the punchline. And here's what I'm so passionate about talking about. It's embedding leadership coaches within a team can really be an impactful way to approach this. So there's a client I want to share that I was working with a few years ago. Let's call her Linda. And she provides a really great example. Linda was managing a team. It was within a larger organization that had implemented agile ways of working. And her team was reorganizing into daily and weekly agile ceremonies. Now, when we first met, she told me she'd always had this innate skill with solving complex problems. She solved puzzles. She could see what needed to happen faster than anyone, and she really relied on this skill to direct her team. Now, with the changes underway, though, she started sensing there was resistance going on. She started hearing chatter, like people were feeling frustrated, and there was the quantity of meetings that they were being asked to attend. And after a few coaching conversations, she decided to
Hello.
request hello, hi there. She requested feedback from her directs, and then she discovered that the majority felt she was unapproachable, she was not available to coach them, and they felt unheard. So she had been solving problems for them, but her leadership style was showing up, unbeknownst to her, as aloof, superior, overly rational, and emotionally distant. But until then, no one had given her this feedback. They were just thinking it. So now, throw in a new way of working, there wasn't a clearing for it or an understanding about why they were doing it. So Linda took the feedback and created some distinctions and follow up actions that made a really big impact and difference with her team. She was transparent about her learnings, and then she made new commitments to each and every one of them about how she was going to support them going forward. And just that little action, it literally was like a black cloud lifted, and her team was energized with a fresh look at the agile work that they were doing. We all know like what leaders say, what they do has this gravitational pull to it. They can take a great team down and they can pull a crappy team up. And one of the biggest ahas coaching gave Linda is that despite her amazing ability to discern and solve problems, in order to have that kind of flipping a coin with heads on both sides like effect on her team, she needed to bring her attention back from the problem to the person managing the problem herself and start solving from there. All right, so admittedly, not all change initiatives, which often imply an end date, represent agile work, which is adaptive and ongoing. But what we're really talking about, at least in part, is how you lead through change. And there's a study I wanted to share with you by the Human Capital Institute and the International Coach Federation. And it was done a few years ago where they researched the role of coaching in change management initiatives. There was a total of 432 respondents in this particular study. And one of the questions they asked their respondents was to think about the most and the least successful examples of change management in their organization, and then to choose words that characterize the initiatives. So the most frequently cited words associated with successful change management were things like involvement, communication, planning, leadership, no surprise. But then the most frequently cited words associated with unsuccessful change management, here we go: communication, planning, leadership, 3 out of the 4. So, communication, planning, and leadership are the keys that determine either success or failure. And in fact, these are some of the words the Business Agility Institute uses in the Business Agility Domains model about leadership. Some words are in there like communication, transparency, leadership, among other related words like empower, delegate, coach, inspire. So now these words on a common image, and I'm sure we've all seen this, right? It's that proverbial iceberg. In the positive, creating vision, communicating the why of empowering teams, inspiring accountability. And then there's the negative, holding information, leading with a command and control style, micromanaging, judging, and so on. Both can be above the line, both can be below the line, right? Things we see, things we don't. But then there's that tip of the iceberg that we see, and it pales in comparative size to the rest. And I kind of wanted to share, I'm a huge Stranger Things fan. I'm not sure any of you out there who've watched it, but I kind of like to think of this as part, the part under the water as the upside down, and the part we can see as the right side up. And for those of you who haven't seen it, um, the upside down is this alternative dimension existing in parallel to the human world, and it's home to all these nightmarish creatures. And so there's this natural focus on agile leadership that sits above the surface, right? And it focuses on strategy, process agility included in that. And it's what enables a leader and their team to set, communicate, operationalize, and then adapt their vision and desired outcomes to the changing needs of their customers. So this is the part we can see. But then the part we can't see, mindset and perspective. And I like to call this the leader OS. Why? Because mindset is that ecology of our emotional state. Perspective are the stories we've got running. But together they make this kind of background operating system. And it's going to determine whether we're running efficiently or whether we're going to slow things down. So let me bring this to life with another very short story. There was a traveler, okay, and he spotted this guy sitting on a bench, an elderly person. And he came up and said, "Hey, I'm new to the city. I really want to know what your city's like." And then the elderly person said back to him, "Well, give me a sense of what the people were like where you're coming from. Curious to know what it was like there." And he said, "I hated it. It was awful. They were judging and they constantly were trying to cheat me, and I always felt like I had to watch my back." And he said, "Unfortunately, the people in this city are kind of like the people in the last city he visited." And then a little bit later, another traveler came, asked the same question: "What are the people like in the city?" And the elder said to him, "Well, tell me what they were like in the last city you visited." And he said, "Actually, it was great. They were positive. I felt welcome. People were really giving, and everyone kind of like communicating with each other. They were super friendly." So then the elder said to him, "Well, you're in luck. The people in this city are pretty much the same." So the key here is we take our mindset and perspective everywhere we go. And it's really shocking to think about like how many people and leaders go from company to company, team to team, hoping to experience different patterns. And yet what we fundamentally see, this repetitious cycle, the grass is always greener on the other side, as the saying goes. But the trouble is we don't know we're taking our grass with us. It's in the upside down. So there was a study done by Fortune 1000 companies that said 48% of leaders who underwent coaching actually increased their work quality. It led to higher engagement, productivity within their teams. Another client summed up a great back of the envelope business case for coaching. Um, he was recently sharing there was an impact that he had. There was a hiatus that he had to take from leadership coaching because of a cost cutting initiative that was underway. Let's call this guy Tom. Tom had felt really increasingly pessimistic. He couldn't get his head around choices being made by his company's C-suite. And to put fuel to the fire, his boss was getting laid off, and he absolutely adored her. He had about 100 people beneath him, and despite the need to communicate with them, he literally should have been, navigating it, but he was like, "I'm wondering why I'm even here. I don't know the why I should even stay." But then when I think about how I could have reframed things, okay, how had I been working with a coach just over the last 6 weeks, you know, um, how that time, 6 hours, less than a full day's work, could have impacted the 100 people underneath me. And let's say they make about more or less 100 grand for simplicity's sake a year over 6 weeks. that could have saved about a 1.5 million in lost productivity that I know we experienced due to my lack of leadership. Now go multiply that across other leaders. So embedded leadership coaches can help leaders surface what's in that upside down. And then once revealed, they're better positioned to provide vision and to know when to flip a coin with heads on both sides to empower their teams. Now let's talk about that last piece, bowling. Now, more specifically, I'm talking about bowling bumpers, those things, the guardrails like structures that children often use when they're learning how to play the game. Why? Because it bops the ball back into the optimal lane that's going to get them to hit the pins, their outcome. Now, the bowling bumpers help develop muscle and the muscle memory that are actually a really efficient way to learn because it harnesses what we find in neuroscience, what's supportive, think dopamine, and what's repetitive, think creating new neural pathways. And I know it's not just children who lack that muscle memory. We all do. One of my favorite sayings I hear Tony Robbins say, and I'm going to quote it: you get rewarded in public for what you practice in private. And we're so good at doing this when we use business agility coaches to help teams shift their behavior and mindset as they're learning new ways of working. We observe teams in new ceremonies. We're constantly bopping them back into their lane. But we often forget to do this with leaders. And it's this embedded leadership coaching model that can be really impactful. Why? Because it lives in conversation. So um, I'm going to move on to this next slide because I'm actually know that we're closing in on our time, and I want to make sure we get to Q&A. So I kind of want to wrap up with my promise to share a few coaching hacks. All right, how do we bring this all together? Coins and Stranger Things, upside down and the right side up, and bowling. What I want to share with you are key takeaways related to Agile leadership muscle building. So, and this can apply whether you actually are applying it to your leader with a coach, but if you don't have that coach, these are ways to have immediate impact. So one is having a coin-like, how do you have that coin-like wisdom? And a simple hack to practice for a leader to be poised to do this is simply a daily practice of reflection, what some people call game filming. We see the best of sports teams do this. They go back to the locker room, they look at their game, they evaluate their actions, they look at what they may have overlooked. Okay. Brendan Bouchard, I love, has some great questions to ask at the end of each day. Leaders should be doing this. Quite frankly, we all should be doing this. Here's a couple of them. A situation or task I handled well today was simple. Something I realized or learned today was I could have made today even better if I. Something that could have helped me help or inspire others was. So it's amazing what just a few minutes of game filming can do to generate self awareness so that we can get ourselves out of our own way. Two, we talked about the fact that the key parts to the leadership muscle includes a focus on strategy, but we also have to focus on the mindset and perspective, Leader OS. What I love to practice is something by the table group, and it's an easy, quick hack for surfacing the upside down. Now, this is done with a leader and their team. I would say ideally 8 people or less, and it just takes an hour. What you do is you sit together and you ask 2 questions. What do you think you're world class at? What is your genius? And 2, where do you need to improve? And then each person shares their view about themselves and then solicits feedback from their colleagues. Because the thing is, we all may have blind spots, and without asking for it, we don't get it. The key is in soliciting the feedback. So we can use each other in a coach like fashion, but it takes creating that space to do it. People think things, it's like money on the table. They're just not saying it. So this practice really helps to create this safe space to do it and to surface things to get them out of the upside down. Now, finally, we talked about the bowling bumper. Here's another great hack. This comes from a body of work from Marshall Goldsmith called Stakeholder-Centered Coaching. And it's a simple way to basically create that bowling bumper. Are you doing what you need to do to be your best self? And what you do is you share your strengths, your areas of opportunity to 3 to 5 people that you know have your best interest in mind. And when a leader is doing this on a regular cadence, every 2, 3, 4 weeks, and simply, ask these questions, what happens is they are tasked with being held accountable to what they're working on. And then they get to get feedback on whether or not they're showing up in the way that they need to. Okay, I know I'm flying through this. There's so much I want to share, and the time is limited. Um, so if you'd like to connect with me, please do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share this. You can tell I'm very passionate about this topic. But what I want to do is open this up and let's create a dialogue. And I'm going to answer questions, but I really want this to be a conversation. So please feel free, if you have any insight, to join.